You are hereby summoned to attend the special meeting of the Health and Community Committee to be held in the Council Chamber, Derry Road, Strabane, on Thursday, the 12th of September 2024 at 2 p.m. So commence with the roll call. So Alderman McMorris. Alderman Montgomery.
Here.
Alderman Wilkinson. Councillor Paul Boggs.
Shaw.
Councillor Boyle.
Here.
Councillor Clark.
I'm Shaw.
Councillor Deany.
I'm Shaw.
Councillor Duffy. Councillor Farrell.
Here.
Councillor Harkin.
Here.
Councillor Heaney.
Shaw.
Councillor Hutton.
I'm Shaw.
Councillor McDaid. And Councillor Cheney.
Here.
Thank you, members.
All right, and we will move on to number 3, which is our broadcasting statement. So I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. If you are seated in the public seating/media areas, it is possible that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in the possibility that your image will become part of the broadcast. By entering the council chamber and using the press or public seating area, you're consenting to being filmed and consenting to the use and the storage of those images for webcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. A copy of the council privacy notice may be found on the council website. All right, and now we're going to move on to agenda number 5. So we're here today to look at the application for a HMO licence at 11 Park Avenue. And we have Kevin Bloomfield here, who is our HMO manager in the north. So thank you for being here today, Kevin, and I'll let you take us through the report.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. It's an application for a new licence at a property at 11 Park Avenue in Derry, Londonderry. The application was received on the 25th of June from G. Mullen Sons Limited, and the property is proposed to be managed by Property Link Derry Limited. There's a number of key issues, members, for your consideration. When you're considering an application, there are 5 grounds you have to be satisfied before a licence can be granted. They are, well, there's been a breach of planning control. The owner and manager are fit and proper persons. The management arrangements are satisfactory. You have to have regard to over provision of HMOs in the locality and the physical standards in relation to that accommodation. In relation to the first of those, breach of planning control, we've consulted with planners in the council, and there's a planning appeals case in relation to this property, and full plan permission was granted on the 29th of March 2024, and the reference is in your appendix. A copy of the Plan Appeals Commission judgment is at Appendix 1 as well, members, in your papers. In relation to the owner and the manager, whether they're fit and proper persons, we have to have regard to a number of factors that are listed in point 3.3 of the report, members. The applicant and the manager have confirmed that not been convicted of any of those relevant offences. The applicant or manager have not been convicted of any issues in relation to housing or HMO legislation, and officers are not aware of any other issues that would result in the manager or the owner not being a fit and proper person. In relation to the next factor, members, that you have to have regard to is the proposed management arrangements are satisfactory, and that looks at a number of things, and whether the manager is competent to manage the property, whether any other person named on the licence is a fit and proper person. In this case, there isn't anyone else named on the licence, so that doesn't come into play, and that the proposed management structures and funding arrangements are in place. The manager has completed training in accordance with Section 63 of the HMO Act to demonstrate his competence, and there has been a number of documentation submitted in to support the application that are identified there in point 3.8 of your report. Majority of them relate to the fire safety and energy efficiency within the property. There's 2 members to just draw your attention to that. There's confirmation from an accountant acting on behalf of the owner that there are sufficient funds available to bring the property up to HMO standards and maintain it during the life of the licence, and a detailed antisocial behaviour plan has been submitted. The next factor, members, you have to regard to is whether the HMO will result in overprovision of HMOs in the locality. And there's the legislation requires you to look at two aspects of that. Firstly, it's the number and capacity of licensed HMOs in the locality and the need for housing accommodation in the locality and extent to which HMO accommodation is required to meet that need. For the purposes of the Act, just for your information, the property is located close to Ulster University, Northwest College and Brook Park, and a large area of open space as well close to the city centre. The applicant's planning consultant described it as a mixed-use area, and that was submitted as part of the Planning Appeals Commission appeal. In relation to looking at the number and capacity of licensed HMOs in the locality, there are currently 2 licensed HMOs in Park Avenue with a total permitted occupancy of 4 persons. And when we look at the need for HMOs in the locality, on the 19th of August, on the 9th of August, when an assessment was done, there were 18 properties available for let in BT 48. Of those, 6 were licensed HMOs, which represented 28 bed spaces. You'll be aware, members, that's in the summer period when it's coming up to the start of the new academic year, so you typically would find more HMOs advertised at that time of the year. When we look at the NIHE's investment plan for the city for 2023 to 2026, there are 4,275 individuals on housing stress within the locality. When we move on down and we look at McGee College, they currently provide accommodation for 675 rooms over 3 different campuses, and while having a total intake of 5,242 students. There was a report in 2023 that identified the need for additional 500-700 student beds within the city. And again, the Vice Chancellor of McGee has indicated that the growth within the will increase up to 6,500 students in the next 5 years. HMOs can play an important role, particularly in relation to housing students, people on low incomes, and members of vulnerable groups, including migrants coming into the city as well. When we look at the living accommodation itself, as the final factor, we have to look at if it's fit for human habitation. It was inspected. It complies with the physical standards for a 5-person HMO. There's one item of work outstanding which relates to NIE moving electrical supply cupboards slightly. We've no concerns about that getting done. In relation to the room sizes, all of the rooms significantly exceed the minimum permissible area under the 2016 Act, which is 6.5 square metres, the minimum room size being 10.33 square metres. Members, objections were received in relation to this application from 11 individuals. The objections relate to the increased noise and disturbance, parking and traffic issues, waste management and cleanliness, impact on community cohesion, safety and security concerns, and property value implications. In relation to increased noise and disturbance, the proposed licence for the accommodation has provided a detailed antisocial behaviour plan. So that allows the manager to deal with any issues that arise during the duration of the licence in relation to antisocial behaviour. Those would be reported through to the HMO units as well, and we can take enforcement action in relation to it, in relation to either a breach of licence conditions, or if it's necessary, members we can bring back before members to revoke a licence if the ASB plan isn't being dealt with to deal with any increased noise or nuisance in the property. Parking and traffic issues was one of the other objections, members. That is not part of your consideration today for a HMO. It doesn't fall within the remit of the 2016 Act. Waste management and cleanliness. Again, that's a condition if the licence is granted that the property has to be maintained, and that there's additional requirements put on the landlord if there is accumulation of rubbish or within the property, that they are responsible for removing it during the duration of the licence. In relation to the impact of community cohesion, it may be accurate to say that the occupants of a HMO may be more transient. The proposed licensee has responsibility to maintain the management of the property to an acceptable standard. Ulster University has a comprehensive induction programme to assist their students to integrate into the local community and have a robust disciplinary policy in place. We would actively engage with the Ulster University, Queen's University and the colleges right throughout the north to deal with any issues because of ASB associated with the property and dealing with issues of community cohesion as well. In relation to safety concerns, the property meets the safe by the design standards for the property, and there is no evidence to suggest that the perceived transient nature of the HMO tenants at this property would have a negative impact on the security of the objectors' homes. And property valuation implications, again, remember that falls outside of the scope of the HMO Act, and it's not something you can consider when you're making a determination. There is no equality rule needs climate change or data protection implications in relation to this. Financial, legal improvements and others. Again, if the application is refused, the applicant has a right to appeal it to the county court within 28 days. And the recommendation from officers is to grant the licence in accordance with the proposed decision, which was issued on the 25th of October. And that proposed decision, as I said, was to grant the licence in the terms applied for 5 occupants. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Kevin. So I'll just open it up to members now if anyone has any questions at this stage. Yes, Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Kevin, for that comprehensive report. A lot of very useful information within it. Kevin, you did talk there a number of times around, and one of our considerations is location and licensed HMOs within the area. You talked, I was trying to take notes as you were speaking, so forgive me if I've got this wrong. I have that you've got 2 licensed HMOs within the area, and then you talked then about a further 6 licensed HMOs. Could you give us a wee bit more information around that? And just as a final point, you spoke in relation to some of the objections that have been received, and I suppose the applicant's alternative to those objections was around an antisocial behaviour plan. I don't see the antisocial behaviour plan attached in the papers or in the appendices. Is there any way that we can have a look at that as part of our considerations going forward? Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Councillor. In relation to the locality, there was 2 licensed HMOs on that particular street. In relation to the area, sorry, if you give me just 1 second, within Derry and Strabane Council area, there are 193 licensed HMOs. And that was at the end of June, at the end of the financial period. In relation to the antisocial behaviour plan, yeah, I can show that when we go in to consider the application. I can pull it up on the computer and throw it up on the screen for you, members, if you want to have a look at that. There is guidance in relation to what an antisocial behaviour plan must contain. That the ASB plan that was submitted was assessed by officers to ensure that it met those criteria.
Yep, no, I appreciate that it may meet the criteria, but sometimes a plan meeting the criteria and meeting the reality of a neighbourhood can be slightly different. So I would like to consider the plan based on my own knowledge of the neighbourhood and how I think that might fit. So if we can get that, Chair, through you before we go on to our considerations, I think it would be useful. Thank you.
No problem, Councillor Tierney. Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and thank you, Kevin, for your report. And look, I'm sure people here are aware that this application was originally rejected by the council, and which is important in terms of our deliberations today. And I'm just looking through at some of the aspects of this. I mean, you know, I know you're speaking in terms of the legislation and the act, but like are you familiar with Park Avenue? Okay, well, I am, because I grew up there, and it's one of the most congested streets in the city. So congested that there's discussion about, there's been discussion about making it a one-way system, right? There's concern from the fire service about being able to access buildings. And so any discussion about what happens in that street, I think, cannot preclude if there's a possibility of increased congestion there. And so that, I think, for anybody that lives there, or anybody that is familiar with some of the housing issues in the city right now, that has to be looked at. I'm not quite sure why the report or reading there about saying that, you know, dismissing the idea that a single family home wouldn't be of interest to anyone there. I think that's just not true, flatly not true. I don't know how anybody could make an assessment that, given the housing crisis that we have in the district, that somebody wouldn't be interested in having a family there or having a home there. And then look, this is just for yourself. Like, look, there is a very real concern. There's been big meetings about these issues in the vicinity about HMO creep, right up through Park Avenue. And you know, I think that there would be none of my colleagues who wouldn't be aware of like how agitated residents are around this area about this. And so this is the context really that we're having this discussion about, you know, granting a license that has previously been rejected by the council. So if I could just get your thoughts on any of that, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Councillor. In relation to congestion on the streets, that's an issue that falls solely under the remit of planning, and the HMO Act does not permit you to consider that. That's considered under the Planning Act rather than HMO legislation. HMO looks at solely the number of HMOs in the area and of licensed HMOs and the need for housing accommodation in the area. In relation to the need for single family dwellings in that area, nobody's disputing that there is a need. What we're suggesting in the report that there's HMOs can meet the need for potentially a different demographic within that area in relation to students and in particular for under 35s. When they look at the housing benefit, the housing allowance that they can receive, you'll know it's reduced. It's less for those under 35, so they may not be fit to a feel of a one person or a family dwelling themselves. So in relation to HMO creep, I'm not overly familiar with the area, so I don't think it would be probably appropriate for me to comment on that in any significant way.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Councillor Farrell?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Kevin. Like Councillor Hargan, I'm a Rosemount native, so I do know the area particularly well, and specifically around the test about over-provision of HMOs. So you've already said that there's 2 in Park Avenue itself, which is a pretty small street. But when you look at the wider Rosemount area, and I just had a quick glance at the HMO register, there are 5 on Grafton Street, 2 on Ernest Street, 4 around the corner, 4 on Rosemount Avenue, 5 just around the corner in Fairman Place, 2 on Mountjoy Terrace, and that's not even looking further down the street at Argyle Street. You know, there is a proliferation of HMOs in the wider Rosemount area. So in terms of over provision, what does that mean exactly? Do you look at one street, you know, one postcode, or are we looking at the wider area? Because it is clear that there are a lot of HMOs and there'll be a lot more applications coming. So what are we allowed to consider in terms of the definition of that test? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The issue in within your borough is there's no HMO subject plan, or there's nothing within your local development plan as it stands at the minute to specify the maximum number of HMOs you can have in a locality. And so there's nothing specified there. So and when you're looking at making an assessment of the number of HMOs in the area, you have no benchmark to benchmark it against. And I think that's something members you maybe want to consider with your colleagues in planning, that when they are finalising their local development plan, that you do include such recommendations. In Belfast, for example, within policy areas, it's no more than 20% HMOs. And if it's in an individual street, it's no more than 10% HMOs on that street. Difficulty is there isn't a benchmark standard adopted by the council to allow you to look at that specific criteria. So at the end of the day, it then becomes a judgment call. Is there too many HMOs? So you're looking at, again, the number and capacity of HMOs within the city, and you're looking at the where HMOs can fill a need within the city. That doesn't mean to say that there isn't other needs in the city, which there clearly are from the Housing Executive's investment plan for 2023 to 26. There clearly is a need for other types of accommodation, but you have to judge it can HMOs meet some of the need within the city when you're making your determination.
Thank you, Kevin. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Chair, and Kevin, thank you for the presentation, and it was a detailed presentation. I think we're all from Rosemount today because my family's from Rosemount too. So well aware of the area and the issues that there are. I'm well aware of the concerns around the proliferation of HMOs within the Rosemount area in general. I think we need to be careful though, because HMO isn't a dirty word. It has its absolute place. We are in the midst of a housing crisis, and HMOs very much play a part in resolving some of those issues. We also have the expansion of the university, which we are all very much looking forward to. So we need to look at these things in the round. But having said that, HMOs work when they are well managed and that they are looked after and the plans are in place. I was going to ask around the antisocial behaviour plan, because I think that's really important that we get sight of that and get a look at that. Probably the only question, Kevin, that I have for you at the minute is just around an appeal process, because I'm just not quite clear around it. So this is a reissue of an existing licence? No, this is a new licence. So if this goes ahead and if we approve this, can residents appeal? If we don't approve this, can the manager of the property appeal? That's probably the question that I need to get clear in my head today, because as a council, we have already refused this through the planning process, and that was the position that we took as a council. That went to planning appeal and it was approved, and we're now sitting here today looking at this from a different angle. So it's just to be very clear in my own head around where we're at with it and the decisions that we need to be making. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. In relation to the appeals process, the applicant has a right to appeal to the county court if the licence is refused or if it's granted with conditions other than what they applied for. That appeal has to be within 28 days. The residents do not have a right to appeal to the granting of the licence. Members, however, during the duration of the licence, if there is issues that arise if the licence is so granted, the licence can be varied during that period to impose additional conditions. Or if there's a serious breach of any of the conditions of the licence can be revoked by members. And it is something that we have done in the past in other council areas where there has been issues. If there is a robust ASB plan in place, it can solve a lot of those issues. The managing agent is here, and maybe with members hearing from the managing agent to identify how they have dealt with any issues with ASB and other properties in the past.
I'll bring in Councillor Harkin, and I know you have your chance then just to clear that up. Is that okay? Councillor Harkin?
Thanks, Chair. And just following on from Councillor Duffy. So look, this is a new application. So what's the building, the premises being used for right now? Is it empty? Because there isn't a licence right now for HMO, I presume. So is there anybody living in it that is paying a rent?
On the date of our inspection, the property was vacant. I couldn't go into the detail of the historic use of the property. I don't have that information, but again, maybe the manager might be able to enlighten us.
Thank you, Kevin. All right, so on that, we are going to move on. We have representation here from some of the objectors. So there was 11 objectors, and on behalf of the 11 objectors, we have Deirdre Gill Goodall and her father, Patrick Gill. So Deirdre, I will let you speak to the members.
I, Deirdre Gill Godsall, are here today to represent the local community of Park Avenue and surrounding area to an objection application regarding a HMO licence for the property 11 Park Avenue, Derry City, BT 48 OEH. As a community, we have many reasons to object to this application going ahead. Over the past 3 years, there's been a lot of issues that have arose from this property being used as a HMO, and this has had serious impact on the neighbours and community as a whole, and it has affected their lives personally. Antisocial behaviour is a key factor in the objection to this licence application. This property, 11 Park Avenue, Derry City, was previously used as a multiple occupancy dwelling from 2021. Over the course of this period, both the PSNI called 7 times and McGee University community safety wardens, called up to at least 22 times, had to be contacted regarding antisocial behaviour and excessive noise. When the community safety wardens could not resolve this issue, it was then they contacted the PSNI also. There were late night parties, extremely loud music played from ghetto blasters, slamming doors and shouting. And one of the students actually said to an adjoining neighbour, "You've had your day." On one occasion, when my mother, God rest her, was very ill at the time, requested some peace and quiet, she was pushed out of the way by one of the residents. When asked, the landlord of the property refused to provide any contact details. He was extremely rude and portrayed an aggressive manner towards an attached neighbour. With no contact with the landlord, we had to struggle to find the right people to help us regarding the antisocial behaviour. This is a community with various ages, ranging from small children to sick and elderly people. One elderly lady in her late 70s was afraid to leave her house in the evening and pop to the local shop as she feared passing the property. Another resident adjoining to 11 Park Avenue had to go on antidepressants as she could not cope with the excessive noise and could not get any sleep, which sent her into the depths of depression. She felt that she was being tortured, as so did many neighbours in the area. There are also many school children who were affected by this antisocial behaviour, as they could not get to sleep due to excessive noise, especially in the adjoining houses where school children still live. This has caused and is again causing anxiety as we head into the new academic year. Article 28 of the UNCRC states every child has the right to an education. Surely the emotional well-being for all, especially the elderly and children, should be greatly considered in this case. The next issue I wanted to talk about was parking and traffic issues, but as this does not affect HMO legislation, and Councillor Harkin has already addressed this, I'm going to move on to my next point. Our final objection is dealing with waste management and cleanliness. Houses and HMOs present specific waste management challenges, in addition to generating more waste than other property types. Local authorities suggest that these properties often produce low recycling rates, high levels of recycling contamination, as well as incorrect presentation of waste and fly tipping. This has been proven over the last few months when the property was used as an Airbnb. Some residents in the neighbourhood leave their bins outside as they struggle to get them up and down the steps into their backyards. And every week, green bin bags have been carried from the property on 11 Park Avenue by the lady cleaner and put into the bin that had room mixed recycling materials with household waste. It has been recognised that number 11 property bins were never put out. The back of Park Avenue has been disgusting with litter, and for this reason, and again, no one has anyone to contact. as I mentioned earlier, that the landlord point blank refused when contact details were asked. Over time, this would cause an overall decline in the cleanliness and appearance of our area. This would not only be unsightly, but also could attract vermin and pose health risks to residents. This is a family-orientated residential area with single occupancy dwellings. It is a community where neighbouring families are friendly and look out for each other. Everyone has the right to live in peace and find safety and security in their own homes. No one should be frightened to leave their home. The constant turnover of tenants can lead to a lack of familiarity among residents. Knowing our neighbours contributes significantly to the security of our homes. This is a basic human right. Over 11 letters from local residents have been sent into council to object to this application for a HMO licence from Park Avenue, Rosemount Avenue, Academy Terrace, top half of Academy Road, Tudor Court and Tudor Close. We would like to make it clear that this is not an attack on HMOs. We appreciate that the university is growing and students need somewhere to live, but the fact is, in this particular house, the tenants had no respect for the residents in the neighbourhood and their behaviour was completely unacceptable. To finish off, I would like to quote Article 28 from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone has the right to live in a peaceful and orderly society where your rights are protected, and it is ours, the local community and neighbourhoods surrounding 11 Park Avenue's human rights to live in peace. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Deirdre. So I'm going to open it up for questions to members. If anyone, Councillor Boyle.
Thank you, Chair. All enough. My people are from that part of town as well. We could put a football team together here rightly. Deirdre, thanks for coming on, and Pat, nice to see you again. Deirdre, you said that when it was operating as a HMO, evidently without a license, thinking, it was a student accommodation at the time, is that correct? Yeah. And obviously then you said that you'd made contact with the community safety warden team and subsequently the PSNA as well. Yeah. Had you ever made any contact with the university's housing office in relation to the behaviour of their students, and did you receive any feedback from them at all? Go ahead.
Will you talk?
At went to what I call it the year meeting down there. I think Councillor Heaney was at that meeting last year, and it went down to Belfast, and they give them some of them an ultimatum on a 3 strike issue. If it came back up again, it would be put out of the university. So what do you call it? I eased up for a wee bit. There was a foreign national, as you call him, staying on the place, and he was pushing and pushing, but he was looking for action that he could play the other card, the anti-racist thing. But he pushed my wife out on the street, which was knocked at the booty down to put the music down. So people in Belfast said that if this was going to continue, they didn't want it ending up like Holy Lands in Belfast, because that was ongoing at that particular time as well. So they were strict on that. So they called all these students in and they had a word with them. Some of them were nurses and they left there and moved to another location, but the rest of them stayed there up until the end of the time. But off and on, they were out of balance.
Thank you, Patrick. Sorry.
Just subsequent to that, Chair, thank you. So the university did, in a sense, take some action, and it did seem to dissipate somewhat. Then is that? Yeah. Okay, that's grand. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you, Patrick. Were you looking on, Councillor Tierney?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Deirdre and Patrick, thanks very much for coming along today and giving us, I suppose, a resident's view of how life is in Park Avenue, living beside this HMO. Deirdre, you talked about the antisocial behaviour that was coming from the property when it was previously used as a HMO, and you talked about the lack of communication from the landlord with yourselves as local residents. I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. when this property was previously used as a HMO, are you aware or have you ever been shown an antisocial behaviour plan, or are you aware that one was in place? And what confidence do you have going forward in an antisocial behaviour plan? You also spoke about the property being used in recent months as an Airbnb, and one of Councillor Harkin's questions to Kevin was he aware if what the property was being used for now? Is it still being used as an Airbnb, or is it being used now as a HMO, or what's your understanding that the property's been used for at the moment?
Well, today there was someone in there, a young girl let herself in today. I don't know how many other people are in there. I was just coming from the shop and I saw a young girl, maybe 20 odd, going in with a rucksack. But I
And
don't know.
During the summer months here, we had a very bad weekend with that Airbnb, where a crowd of young boys came down and they were down for a party, and we had it from a Friday to a Monday morning. And it was quite a rough weekend. I mean, nobody to contact them because their university and all's closed, and there are no wardens at that time of year.
And just, sorry, Chair, just around the antisocial behaviour plan, has that ever been shared with residents? Are you aware of it at all?
No, don't know nothing about that. Sort of a plan, but when it's too bad, you phone the police.
Yeah.
And sometimes they come out and sometimes they don't. You know, they're too busy. That's it. Way down the scale.
Thank you, Patrick and Deirdre. Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for Deirdre and Pat coming in today. And because you're taking time out of your day, you're busy, you're coming up to Strabane, and you know, it's not always easy to come to these events and just give presentation. And I mean, looking at the statistics in terms of the number of times that the police were called, or that you had to get the community wardens involved, or get McGee involved, is shocking. I mean, and what I usually try to do myself is I imagine if that was next door to me and if I would accept that, and I think that that's the way as councillors and aldermen we should think about this, because that's unacceptable in terms of like, you know, so it just seems like there's been very bad management of this. Do you know what I mean? That seems to have been a big problem, not having anybody to contact. That just makes people feel like, I mean, people must be exasperated. And there is confusion as well, because we're on a learning curve as well because of the issue of HMO, particularly around the university, and the fact that there is more applications now for HMOs, and kind of like what's the difference between a guest house or an Airbnb. And there's different ways there's different regulations, or and some it's much easier to do it some ways than to do it others. But it's becoming a bigger issue. I'm just out from a task force meeting about temporary accommodation here in the district myself, where there was other representatives there as well. So yeah, I mean, because the thing is, right, we know that there's going to be more students coming to the city, and we welcome that. This is something we've all campaigned for. And I think that there's, you know, they're going to be coming from across Ireland, from across Britain, from around the world. And I think it'll be ultimately great. But the issue here is it's about getting the balance right, and the balance between residents and students coming in to live in the city. And this just seems to be an example here where the balance just isn't right. Do you know what I mean? And there's going to be, rather than people feeling confident about more students coming in and about the university having a plan to address accommodation needs, this just seems to be going in the opposite direction. So I don't know. What do you think about the issue of just balance and how to think about that?
Well, I would sort of manage right. They're given a layout. How do you love their life when they come to these places? Without coming at 3 in the morning, we have 2 to 3 taxi loads of people and party into the morning. No, that shouldn't exist. So they really love. get an education, have a bit of fun, a bit of life. But there's plenty of places to go rather than come back to the one place at night. Keep all the neighbours up and annoy everybody.
All right, thank you, Councillor Harkin. Thank you, Patrick. Councillor Heaney.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you again for coming on, the callers. It was just a query through all these numerous incidents that emanated from that property. You had contact with the police, the wardens, the university. Was there any contact with the landlord? And if so, what was the response?
The landlord wasn't prepared to give us his phone number or anything. He wouldn't talk to us. There was, I know how the letting went, where it came from. There's a sign in the window now for these people here, is it?
To take it over.
They have a sign on the window now. But up to that, we had no way of getting, just by using the wardens, the police, and yourself, as you know, I rang you to see if I could sort of help we could get her to where we were going.
Thank you, Councillor Heaney and Patrick. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Deirdre and Patty. Absolutely awful, the situation that you've been living in, and people do have an absolute right to live in peace and to not feel that they're being tortured. I suppose one of the questions is it the same landlord? Yeah. Right,
Yes,
okay.
it is,
So it's the same landlord. Now, the only thing that I'm going to say, the HMO previously that was there, and we'll call it a HMO even though it really shouldn't have been called a HMO or wasn't regulated or licensed as a HMO. There was no regulations around that. The landlord wouldn't talk to you. This will now be a licensed HMO, which will have a management company attached to it, which will have proper contacts, proper regulations, proper rules around it to give residents a bit of comfort in terms of if there is issues, that they will have somebody that they can talk to. I know my aunt lives in Fairmont Place, and I have had conversations with her around the HMOs that are in Fairmont Place. She would say that at this point there's no issues because they are all university accommodation. They're all well managed. If there is an issue, she contacts the university directly or the management company directly, and they're dealt with, and it's really swift. And she has lived there my whole life. So I don't know if that's something. My other concern is that if we don't grant the license for a HMO, does this then become an Airbnb, which will have no regulations? Because my understanding of Airbnbs at the minute is there's very little minimum regulations around them. People will come and go, might be one night, might be 2 nights, and there will be absolutely no control over what's happening there at all. So it's trying to find the right balance for you as residents living in that area, because what we don't want to do is make a bad situation worse. So that's just what I'm thinking of at the minute in my head, just wondering what your thoughts are around that.
Well, if it's run right, and there's no bother with it, it's grand. But if it's going back to what we've previously lived through, it's not grand. And the law doesn't seem to have any balance in this, because there's different regulations for this and that and the other thing. And I think if you want to look for compensation with your lifestyle to move house, no. What do you do? What road do you go down? And who do you talk to? So where does it end?
I know the frustration that you as residents must feel when you're sitting in the middle of that situation, when a landlord won't talk to you, when the police are coming out, when the wardens are constantly being called and not able to do anything, particularly when your wife was pushed. I mean, that's completely unacceptable, and that is something that we need to be addressing in a wider context, not just in relation to 11 Park Avenue, to make sure that people do feel safe and secure in their homes. If there are students who are in HMOs anywhere around the town that are causing those issues, and assaulting people, which is what happened there, then that needs to be addressed as well, because that's completely unacceptable.
Down through the years, we've had student life here, Strand Tech and McGee, and now it's developing into a bigger graduate. But this is the worst onslaught we've encountered. And yet, when we put our hands out for help, we're going nowhere. So this is where we are now today. That's why we're sitting here. So,
Thank you, Councillor Duffy, and thank you, Patrick, again. I know that Kevin is looking to clarify a few things.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Just in relation to complaints received by the council in relation to this property, the records were checked, and there was the last complaint was in 2021 to environmental health, which was resolved at that time. In relation to the effectiveness of an ASB plan, if they are, and we can share that with members, if they are enacted properly, it does have a significant impact on the issues in the property. For example, in the Holy Land, which was mentioned, we don't want it turned into a new Holy Land. Since the introduction of the requirement for HMOs to have an ASB plan in the Holy Land, there's been over a 50% reduction in the issues associated with the ASB, both reported to Belfast City Council and to the universities. In relation to the licence itself, if it is granted, the licence typically is granted for 5 years, but members have a discretion to do two other things. Firstly, you can grant a licence for a shorter period than the typical 5 years. So if members were minded to, they could grant a licence for a year, 18 months, 2 years or whatever, to allow officers to keep a close eye on the property. So if there was any issues during that period of time, the licence will be coming before members again for renewal, or if there are significant issues during that period, the licence could be brought against members, but either for breach of licence conditions, or it could be brought to members again for revocation if the manager and the owner are not dealing with any ASB associated with the property. And again, the issue was referred to there about contact details. As is indicated there, there's a new management agent on site, but you can put that, and they will be named on the licence. And again, members, you can put that in as a condition of the licence that those managers' contact details are shared within the locality. So if there are issues, they can either have it displayed on the property, or the managing agent, you can put it as a condition that they write to the adjoining properties to let them know that they are managing the property, and if there's any concerns to contact them, which may be again something that you may wish to consider. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. That was really useful. So Councillor Boyle, do you still want on?
Aye, please. And that was very useful, actually, Kevin. And actually, it addresses the question I was going to ask Deirdre and Pat. And that is that obviously Kevin's explained now that there will be a managing agent. I think you yourself said now that the contact details are on the window or something like that. Would that give you more comfort now that there would be an agent that's contactable in the event that you have any further problems?
well, it would have to be tested and tried. You know, you just start having a phone number and a wonder you left the phone ringing, nothing happens at the other end, which is very popular at the present time. And your phone about everything. So hold, please hold, we'll talk to you when we get around it. So it needs to be clarified that it's there for you when you ring, if things could go wrong, and not paging you off again.
So basically what you're saying is if it works for you, then that is comfort. But if it's not working,
Of course.
there's no comfort in that at all.
Aye.
Yeah, thanks, Pat.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Councillor Boggs?
Very briefly, Chair, thank you. And it's just on the back of what Councillor Duffy had said and then what Kevin has come back on with. I'm not from Park Avenue, so I'll not be on the football team, unfortunately. To the relief of some, I would imagine. Just obviously in relation to this application, Kevin, but if you can shed more light just on applications more broadly. Yes, you know, if we were minded to put it on a shorter term, who is responsible for the measure of whether it isn't a good idea, whether it isn't suitable for that area? You know, if residents are reporting, who is it up to decide that that needs to go back to members because it's not working? You know, is it up to us as local councillors, or the decision-making body in relation to the licenses, but who actually makes the recommendation or who compiles the evidence to say, you granted this license, it's not working, you need to reconsider it again?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor, in relation to, it's a standard condition on the licence that there is an ASB plan is in place, but that plan, it's not just a plan on paper. If there is a complaint in relation to the property, the applicants, the neighbours, not only can they inform the Environmental Health Department within the council, they can come directly to the HMO unit. We will then directly contact the owner and managing agent to get to find out what they are required to do an investigation of that ASB incident. They're required to keep a record of their investigation. If we request that, they have to share the results of that investigation, and if there is an issue identified, they are required to take steps to deal with that to make sure there isn't a reoccurrence of it. So not only is it the breach in relation to your licence condition isn't the fact that there has been ASB in itself. The breach is how the manager deals with the ASB. So if the manager doesn't, or the owner doesn't effectively deal with that ASB complaint, that we can bring that to, firstly, we can issue a fixed penalty of £2,500 for non-compliance with the conditions of the licence. And if that was the situation, we would then bring that back to the committee after discussing it with the officers within the council, with potentially a recommendation for a revocation of that licence. Now, we have had issues in relation to conditions in other areas where there has been ASB. The manager has taken action, but that action hasn't resolved it. And it has resulted in tenants being evicted from their properties where there has been evidence of ASB, and it has been quite a forceful deterrent to other students or other HMO occupiers within that locality. It's something we work closely with the universities with. So we're getting complaints about the behaviour of the tenants and a property. Not only will we look at it, and environmental health potentially could be looking at it, we'll go to the university directly and deal with the university and get them to investigate it under their disciplinary policy as well. So it's not just a standalone issue, it's something that we actively interlink with other agencies. If there's a PSNI issue, we had one quite recently where there's an issue in a property and we called the PSNI in because there's harassment of the tenants, which impacted on the wider neighbours, which resulted in the licence being revoked. So there are those safeguards built in. And again, so you can have that as you condition your licence, which is a standard condition. We could have enhanced conditions where you require the information to be circulated by the manager to the neighbours of their contact details. And if you wish, you could have a licence for a shorter period than the standard 5-year period. So that gives members reassurance if you decide to grant a licence that this isn't a problem that's going to last for 5 years before it comes up for renewal again. It's something that can be looked at again in a year or 2 years' time if there's a shorter duration put on that licence.
And just very briefly, thank you very much for that. Maybe it is in the plan, maybe it's not because we haven't seen it yet, but in terms of some of the things that the objectors have raised, in terms of waste and, waste management and the cleanliness of an area, would that all factor into the same kind of collaborative working between yourself and the uni and whoever else is involved to make sure that if those issues are raised, they're either dealt with or the application comes back again?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, it's the condition of the standard licence conditions that they have to, the owner has to comply with provisions of the local government commission in relation to the number of bins and whatever in the locality. He's also responsible if there is an additional waste in that come from that HMO because of its usage, and that goes beyond what would be normally collected by the council through their better recycling scheme or the waste management scheme. They're responsible for maintaining that property and making sure those issues don't occur. If those issues aren't dealt with or dealt with effectively, if it's reported to us and that there is an issue, we'll go to the manager. If it's not sorted out, And it's similar in relation to the maintenance of the property. If there's issues relating to maintenance, if there's overgrown hedges in the property, if there is use your standard repairs, if the owner doesn't comply with those requirements of the license, it's a £2,500 fixed penalty straight away. And believe you me, I have no hesitation in issuing fixed penalties. To date, I've issued over £200,000 worth of fixed penalties. That's right, Northern Ireland, and I have no hesitation in doing it. So again, if those issues arise, we as members yourselves, when this came forward on the licensing scheme, is something that members in this council and throughout the other councils made sure there's an ASB plan put in as conditions. There's waste management issues, there's repair and maintenance issues, there is high hedges and all that sort of stuff. So it's all there, it all can be dealt with, and we get complaints, we will actively enforce it to make sure that the conditions of this license are applied. That's where we're at, and it's something that we will only enforce.
Thank you, Kevin. Councillor Harkin, do you still want done?
Yeah, thanks. And I suppose this is the Kevin and Deirdre and Pat. Like, it's difficult to have confidence, to be honest, based on their experience so far about the management of the property, unless it changed hands. But just in terms of the provision in the area, I mean, you've referenced the Holy Land yourself, and it's good to hear that there's some action, but that was delayed for many, many years. And we are in a situation where there is a lot of concern right now about the Glea and Rosemount, this area being turned into a Holy Land. And I suppose the difference between Belfast right now and Derry is that there's these huge student accommodation buildings that are going up. That's not happening in Derry. And so what we're seeing is a potential proliferation of HMOs as the way to kind of address a real issue. And I think that what we keep coming back to is the issue of balance and proper management. And look, I'll just be honest, even if every single HMO was perfectly managed, I'm not in favour of Rosemount being turned into a HMO capital of Derry. And I think that there's clearly some people who do not care about cohesion of communities, who do not care about the changing character of areas and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to figure out what we are actually able to kind of like judge this application on today, because it's a wee bit confusing. We're talking about wide ranging issues, but we're also talking about antisocial behaviour. And I just think that it's not just what you would call antisocial behaviour. It is students have certain lifestyles. I was one of them. I'm sure a lot of people in here that are, if we don't get that balance right, that is actually going to lead to, and it already is leading to, issues of community cohesion. And that's what we're trying to get right here. And it seems to send the wrong message to me that you can just buy a property, put people in it, not care about what residents are dealing with, and then batter on, green light, here you go, keep going. And that doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I totally agree with you. When you look at areas in Belfast, the number of HMOs have destroyed the communities. The issue in relation to this application and similar applications, when you're looking at the balanced community aspect, that's a planning function, and that has to be done through planners and through your local development plans. So you need to get that right in the first instance. Once that's right in the first instance, that when you're coming, as we mentioned as part of the presentation, for all new license applications, you have to be satisfied there isn't a breach of planning control. So if you put in the planning structures in place at the start to make sure there isn't a proliferation, it doesn't get to the stage of licensing. But unless those planning structures aren't, if they're not in place, to allow you to refuse it because of community cohesion and your infrastructure issues, your parking issues, by the time you get to licensing, you're managing an issue. And that's what license is doing, because we can't refuse this on planning because planning has been granted. So we're now, if a license is granted, we're looking at the management of the property to make sure it doesn't have a negative impact on the occupants.
Thank you, Kevin. Councillor Duffy?
Thank you. I have 2 questions now. Well, it might actually be 3. First question is, can the landlord at any time through the license remove the management agent? And second question, if they can we make it a condition of the license that the management agent is retained for the duration of the license? And the third question is just sort of following on, it came into my head there when you were talking. Realistically, there is no grounds for us to refuse this from what I can see. But I'm really concerned about how we move things forward, because if we refuse this, I see this going to appeal and I see it being awarded on appeal. But if it goes to appeal, there will be no additional conditions attached. Would that be correct?
Yeah, in relation to the appeal, that's the easiest one to deal with initially. If it goes to appeal, again, the judge can impose conditions as well if he thinks it's, if they are necessary. Whether they would do so, to be honest, any cases that have been refused in the past that have been appealed, they've all been lost when they went to appeal. So we haven't got a situation where we have refused a property on over-provision that when it went to appeal, the judge overturned that decision. But that's solely based on the fact that we only done that in areas where there is a local development plan with which we can use to reference in relation to social cohesion, and we can have a number put against the percentage of HMOs in the area. That was the first one. Sorry, what was your other questions again? My mind just went blank. Oh, sorry, the agent. Yes. During the course of a license, the manager, the owner can vary the agent, and that would be. And we couldn't actually refuse that, and we couldn't put that as a ground, because that would be commercially sensitive for the manager to make sure that if he wants to have a manager and he wants to change the manager, he can do so. But if he does change the manager is then named on the license, and the same conditions is imposed against that manager. He has to have went on done the Section 63 training in relation to his roles and responsibilities in relation to being a HMO manager. Sanctions can be taken against him. And the big part of the way the license conditions are drafted is if there is an issue in relation to the property, the fixed penalty notice in the first instance goes on the owner. So if the owner gets rid of a competent manager and takes over the management himself, he's leaving himself really open for a potential fixed penalty issue. But it's something that we couldn't include as the condition of the license, that the same manager is maintained.
Thank you. Councillor Tierney?
Thank you, Chair. This conversation is getting more interesting as it rolls on. Learning a whole lot more about HMOs. I don't live in Rosemount either, not too far away, so I might make the subs bench, but I definitely wouldn't be starting. One of our deliberations, Kevin, as we're going through this, is the management arrangements, and it follows on, I think, from what Councillor Duffy has been saying. And listening to Deirdre and Paddy, their experience previously was radio silence from the landlord. Now, I appreciate that the management company may have changed, but I understand that the landlord hasn't. So just because we have now got someone new in the middle doesn't necessarily mean that everything that should have been addressed previously will be addressed going forward. So I have some concerns around that as well, although we have someone in the middle who's a reputation who was uphold across the district in terms of their business and all of that. But I just have a fear that when the management company may be bringing things to the landlord, that they may potentially get the same response that the residents got when they were going. And that, I suppose, is left to be seen. So that brings me on the actual license. And a typical license, as you said, is 5 years. And 5 years is a long time if you're living next door to something like this. But so's 18 months or 2 years. So my question is, in terms of a review process, if we were to make that license shorter, is there a review process in between that where we could find this application back before us, say in 6 months' time, with your recommendation to revoke the license because of whatever's going on? Is that a possibility? Because I think it's something that might give the residents that little bit of comfort, knowing that we're actually taking an interest in this, and it's not just this is up, we'll see in 18 months, 2 years, or 5 years, and we'll deal with it then, because it's still a long time if you're living next door to it.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll come in firstly in relation to the owner or the manager not adhering and doing what they're supposed to. If they get to that stage, if we have to take action, issue fixed penalties, prosecute them or whatever, the manager's going to lose his business. The manager, we can bring him that he's no longer a fit and proper person. And if you're not a fit and proper person for the management of one property, you're not a fit and proper person for the management of any property. So, so in that situation, the manager would lose his business. So it is in the manager's interest to work with the council and the HMO service to maintain it. And it's similar for the owner. If the owner doesn't adhere to the conditions, again, if we have to take any action, we'll bring back 4 members that and with a recommendation that they're no longer a fit and proper person to manage a HMO or own a HMO, and they'll lose their license. If you lose your license for one, you lose your license for all your accommodation. So that's the first issue. In relation to a review period, there's nothing within the legislation that allows for a formal review period during the duration of the license. So what you would have to do then is set the license to a shorter period of time, if that's how you're so minded. But where there is an adverse incident at the property, officers then can review that, and if that's of a significant nature that requires it to be officers to bring it back to committee, we can bring it back to committee with either a recommendation to vary the licence conditions, to revoke the licence conditions, to make a recommendations that the owner and manager is no longer a fit and proper person. So it's done on an instance basis or an issue basis rather than on a formal review basis. There isn't that provision within the Act.
Thank you. I'm very conscious that Neil also hasn't had a chance to speak yet. Are you happy enough if we move on to Neil, Deirdre and Patrick? Are you content that you've put forward all your views for now? Perfect. So Neil, I will let you have your say, and then there'll be more opportunities for questions then. Is that all right? Thank you.
Thank you. Chairperson, elected committee members, thank you very much. But more importantly, Deirdre and Patrick, that sounds awful. We manage reputable HMOs. I believe Councillor Duffy's auntie phoned me on Saturday evening because of fire alarm. If she lives in number 13, she phoned and went through to our mobile. I was there within half an hour, got it switched off, phoned her back, and we had an engineer on Monday morning to look at us. I'm more than happy to give you my mobile number. If you phone our office, you'll get an answer immediately. On the answering machine out of ours, there's a mobile contact number as well. We also, yeah, you know, that just sounds horrible, and we wouldn't allow that to happen at all. You know, we're going to review the antisocial behaviour policy in a minute, and you know, we deal with the parents. If anything like that was going on, you know, the parents of these guys are all very involved in the tenancy. If there's any issues, you know, without the parents, it's a nightmare. It's the mothers that come up to clean at the end of the tenancy. It's them that pay the rent most of the time, and they are very responsible. They don't want parties going on in their houses because they're going to get the bills. They're the guarantors. If there's damage and a load of people coming around, if there's a load of rubbish left lying on the property, they'll get the bill to clear it. During there is time to time whenever students don't take the bins out enough, and we send a contractor around and they pay for it, and the guarantors are generally informed and they're told, you know, take your rubbish out, it's free, and some of them still don't get it. But you know, I used to live in a very similar house to along Park Avenue there, 3-story, and you know, that's where our first child was born. And then once we grew up, in terms of the options, a single family dwelling, we had to we had to move out. As soon as our eldest son was old enough to go out, there was a main road out at the front, and we had to move. But the lady who lives next door, now we rent that house that we used to live in as a student property, and the lady that lives next door, a lady called Jackie Wild, she still lives there. We manage her property, and she has no issues with students living next door to her. Hopefully your auntie doesn't have any issues with the students living next door. We manage them very well. Jackie would tell you, during COVID, they were the only people she saw. You know, she spoke to them all the time over the back wall. Her family couldn't visit. They were out in the front street, and you know, socially distancing with you know, whatever was going on there. We had another house in Stewart's Terrace, and I'm sure a lot of you would know the owners. I'm sure you'd know the owners. That they chose us to sell their property because we managed the property next door to them, and they knew us very well, and they knew us to be reputable, and they knew us to be hardworking, good and honest, and full of family values. They also spoke about the was it the Seven Streets community group around Stewart's Terrace and De Burgh there, that you know, they were very much part of, and enjoyed the vibrancy of the young students living there. You know, they, as part of that community group, they would go to the apparently the Argyle bar for a pub quiz, and the you know, the bar being you know, a lot of students there. You know, I wasn't coming here to talk about the 5 grounds that you guys need to think about. That's a bit above my level. I only came here to address your concerns, and from reading your objections, you know, in terms of noise, if there is any of that, you know, you have our mobile number, and we'll fix it immediately. So we will, and make sure it won't happen. You know, as Kevin says, there's fines for landlords, for agents, and licenses can be revoked, so they can. But you know, and they've talked about the parking there. You know, in my eyes, there's parking out the back. We did a survey of all our students, and just about less than half of them have cars here. You know, a lot of them would pool car to come up at the weekends, but they wouldn't use it. And you know, Councillor Hargan spoke about congestion on Park Avenue, and you're right, it's a disaster. Driving up and down there is a nightmare, and perhaps one way would be much better. But the students aren't going to park out in the front of Park Avenue. There's ample parking in Tudor Court out the back. You know, there was 3 parking surveys done as part of the Plan and Appeal Commission, and you know, the Plan and Appeal Commissioner didn't think that there was any issues with parking, but that's a separate issue to what we're here with today. You know, you were talking about over provision. There's, as Kevin says, there's 2 HMOs in Park Avenue. We manage one of them, number 15. Yeah, number 15, and I'm hoping you've never had any problems from there. But if you do, we would be very there to fix any problems. You know, there's 5 up in Rosemount Avenue there. You know, there's 27 houses in Park Avenue, 63 in Rosemount Avenue. So, you know, Councillor Hargan, you had talked about the amount in Epworth Street and Grafton. You know, the way I was looking at it from, you know, from the top of Northern Avenue on the Argyle bar there, right up to the roundabout, past the shirt factory there, you know, there's only 7 on that main road. And to me, as you know, we would have an estate agents, we have a letting agency, you know, a lot of single family units that don't want those types of houses as much, that lead onto a busy main road. You know, the Phoenix Bar is right opposite there. There's an off license nearby. It's not attractive for young families with kids. You know, there's no outdoor amenities in the property. There's no backyards. And so we would find that a lot of families aren't looking for that anymore, unfortunately. We also find, you know, in terms of owner-occupied properties around the area that you're trying to keep as part of the community, you know, a lot of the houses, they need a lot of investment. You know, some of our landlords, when they buy properties, you know, they're damp. They've been, whoever owned them before, have been renting them out. They haven't been fit for purpose. They need damp proof. They need the floors lifted. A lot of the floors in those houses are a couple of inches of concrete with no damp proof membrane. The roofs need fixed. They're leaking around the windows, and that needs, you know, 50, 60,000 pounds of investment in a lot of those properties. But if you can get a good landlord that's willing to invest that and look after the property, and if they might the right managing conditions in it, you know, I actually think that community cohesion can work very well with houses of multiple occupancy. They're young, vibrant people. You know, they're. Before I heard your story, you know, I was going to say how times have changed since we were young. That sort of thing I didn't think happened anymore. And but you know, to me, look, there's a new cafe opened on Academy Road in the corner of the Berg. You know, if you know, I would see students as using that and adding to part of the community. You know, I wouldn't see as many if that's, you know, some of the single family units wouldn't be going to the coffee shops as much. I wouldn't dream of bringing my kids into a quiet coffee shop. But you know, I do think the young people have a part to play in the community. They shouldn't be partying. They shouldn't be disrespectful. That should be policed and monitored. But we should look at the benefits they can bring. The local sports clubs, the taxis, the cafes, the takeaways, you know, the local shop there, you know, they'll give them a lot of business to help the businesses that you want in your community. And without them, it's you know, it is a lot harder. But you know, you'd also mentioned about safety and security, and that the occupants can be transient. You know, they can, but you know, as Kevin said, the owner has to comply by the regulations. That, you know, the managing agents aren't. We're there to make sure that communities are happy. You know, I don't want Holy Lands. I don't want any areas. You know, a lot of you grew up in that area. I don't want to put people in there that I think aren't right for an area. You know, there's nothing worse than bad tenants, whether they're in houses of multiple occupancy or any house. There's nothing worse than bad tenants for an area that they can ruin an area. But you know, I honestly don't think that the young people would if they're managed properly. You know, in terms of preserving the character of the area, you know, the Planning's Appeal Commissioner had said in his report that, you know, there's no external changes to the houses of multiple occupancy. You know, they still look the same, only they should be well maintained. They should be well looked after. You know, if there is any issues with damp or anything like that, they're forced to fix them. And we, you know, our the antisocial behaviour policy, you know, it starts off with referencing and trying to get referencing for tenants. If you have a look at our website, have a look at our application forms. Ridiculous the amount of information that you know people need to provide and fill in terms of referencing and where they were before. Would be doing inspections in the property. You know, where as soon as we would get the academic year started, we're in and out of the houses pretty soon after to start doing viewings. You know, we want them looking well, but don't want the houses untidy. We don't want rubbish out the back, and we certainly don't want parties or any issues with neighbours. Then we have a specified procedure that if there is any complaints, here's what we do, and I think there's about 10 points to that. But very much it's involving the parents. You know, I know if my parents got you know, informed of anything that you've experienced going on in a house that I was living in, that would have stopped very, very quickly. And you know, parents are very, very involved in it. You know, there is the community safety wardens that will come and sit late at night and stay out your house. We would be more than happy to you know, work with them. There's the environmental health. If there is any issues reported to the HMO unit, that, you know, they will come out and inspect. There's the university disciplinary policy, which you've had experience of. But you know, we personally speaking, you know, I'm involved in a lot of community groups, a lot of local business groups, a lot of groups that my kids are involved with. You know, I want to be part of the community. You know, I want this whole city to be vibrant. I want it to be better in 10 years' time than it is now. It's better now than it was 10 years ago. And you really can feel that the city is prosperous with the city deal and so much more happening. And, you know, I have been an advocate for fighting for increasing McGee. You know, I think that is crucial to the growth of the city. But accommodation is one of the big problems in the growth of McGee. You know, you probably saw Kieran Turish's report on the news last night and, you know, in the papers today. You know, they are highlighting that, you know, the task force is accommodation is an immediate focus on them. You know, there's one of the drawbacks is, you know, the availability of student accommodation is a major obstacle. And, you know, we want to do it right. We want to work under the guidance. You know, we have been working with houses of multiple occupancy for years. When that was first introduced, most landlords, you know, especially the landlords prior to 2008, they didn't care about regulations and fire alarms and things like that. And not our landlords, but generally, we've been fighting to educate landlords for years. You know, it's only this month that on single family dwellings that you need to start, landlords need to start putting smoke alarms in. If you're an owner occupier, there's no legislation to have a fire safe house at all. You know, for houses of multiple occupancy, they get fire risk assessments done. They get, you know, weekly fire alarm tests, 6 monthly services, and you know, they're very, very safe in that form, safe way for young people to live. And you know, houses of multiple occupancy are not just students. It's all young people, sort of under 35. You know, Councillor Harkin had talked about, you know, the emergency accommodation need in this city, and we would provide a lot of houses for that need. But, you know, as part of that, you know, they highlighted, you know, in part of the, you know, the appeal committee publication I read for this property, you know, they're mentioning about small family households comprising, you know, the majority of the housing stress on that list. And I think it's, you know, 51% are single persons that are on that housing stress list. You know, we are there to help everybody, but you know, I don't think I've anything more to say, just about that we try to do things very, very well. And I'm so sorry for what you have had to deal with. It's awful. But I would do, if we take over this house and manage it, and I would do everything in my power to make sure that stops immediately, and you don't have any concerns again. And I thank you for coming all the way here and sitting. It's not a nice experience to come here and front all of this. Fair play to you, and for this. I notice you're going to agree.
Thank you for that, Neil.
I was
really
talking from their
appreciate it.
perspective.
Thank you very much.
But yeah, I think I'm.
Aye, you think that's great. And
Thank you.
just a so
Just
what?
one thing.
Sorry, Patrick.
I really loved the cherry story. Really loved it. Laid out beautiful. They will love happily ever after.
I would do everything in my power to make sure you do. What I was going to suggest, well, I suggest as well before, you know, I'd heard your stories. You know, I could easily bring you around all our, not all of them, but a lot of our student properties, and I could introduce you to the neighbours as well. And they're not having any of the issues that you've been hounded with for such a long time. I don't want this to be a fairy tale. I don't want to be bringing on houses that are of detriment to the community. You know, there is going to be a growth of this city. There is going to be a growth of McGee. You know, if we all work together with communities, you know, I don't want to lose the community cohesion in Rosemount. But I could introduce you to neighbours of our houses. Councillor Duffy's auntie's one of them. And they know they've got somebody responsible there. They know that if there is, it's not just antisocial behaviour, it's repairs. And you know, leaks from houses or so, you know, chimneys from one house to the other. We are constantly getting issues where on terraced houses, you know, the properties are related. And we would do everything we could to help you. And I'm sorry for what you've had to put up with.
Thank you, Neil. So what we're going to do is I can open this for questions now if anyone wants any questions to Neil. I think Councillor Tina, did you indicate earlier? Oh, Councillor Boyle, sorry, no problem.
Thanks. Cheers, Chair. Look, Neil, that's very impassioned, and I appreciate you, you and Pat and Deirdre making the effort to come here, and that's important. It's an important part of the process.
Thank you.
100%. A lot of what you've said there is clearly accurate, and we want to see an expansion of the university and our city to develop and all of that sort of stuff. And just for your benefit, and probably the benefit of some who might not know as well, but our new local development plan will be limiting HMOs to 30% and designated HMO land.
I think that's
that's
a good thing.
That's for the benefit of Kevin as well. So you mentioned that, Kevin. It was something we were very, very specific about when we were putting together the local development plan. So when we get that done, dusted and stamped, that's what we'll be doing. And so there will never, ever again through planning be, I know everybody always keeps using it, there'll never be a Holy Lands once our LDP happens, because people on the planning committee can only then allow a certain number of HMOs on a street or in a designated area. So that's the good news in that regard. And this is a straightforward yes/no answer. I think I know the answer. This is for students. It's not for anybody else. It's for students. That's what the landlord wants. He wants students in his property. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Councillor Farrell?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Neil. I just have one question. How long have you been the management agent for that property?
We're not. We want to be.
So you're not currently
the
management
landlord looks after
agent,
himself
right?
at the moment.
Have you any on? Right, so it doesn't have a HMO license currently. And obviously the objectors have told us that it's been used, you know, over the years without a HMO license. Have you any understanding of the exact status or what it was used for prior to this application?
Yeah, you know, when you mentioned you met the landlord, I wouldn't know the landlord really, really well.
I never met the landlord. It was my aunt who lives next door to number 1113.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of trouble. And he was there, and she asked him, could she have some details to contact him? And he was very rude and aggressive here, and he just said no.
Because, you know, I'd wondered had it changed
I met
since then.
But I questioned and asked him for a contact number. None of your business.
Yeah. Because that surprises me, you know, from my dealings with him. He seemed like a nice enough fella, so he did, but clearly, you know, clearly not.
Thank you, Neil.
I would give you my number.
Chair,
Thank you.
I have a further.
Sorry.
Just a supplementary based on that. So the property doesn't have a HMO license. It's been used as a HMO prior to this. I saw when this bombshell was dropped that Kevin was scribbling furiously. So if it was used as a HMO, it doesn't have a license. Does that impact 3.6 where it says officers are not aware of any other relevant issues regarding the applicant or management agent's fitness? So if this person has been using a property as a HMO, didn't bother applying for a license, does that call into question their fitness to operate as a HMO?
I don't know that he was, you know, I wasn't that aware that he was doing Airbnb and things like that.
We checked it out ourselves on Airbnb because we had about 15 fellas next door for the whole weekend 4 weeks ago. It's 4 weeks ago, wasn't it? 5 weeks ago. I actually spoke to them and asked them, could they just be a wee bit more respectful?
Yeah.
But they were out on the backyard the whole day, drinking all day, music blaring all day on the Saturday.
Sorry, it's as my understanding that in Airbnb, though, there is literally no regulations around them at all. Anybody can set up a property as an Airbnb.
My big concern with Airbnbs in the city is the fire safety. You know, all those Airbnbs, you know, we meet the Northern Ireland fire safety regulations. So that's in terms of, weekly fire alarm tests, fire alarms, and fire doors, escape routes, emergency lighting. But for Airbnbs, look, they don't do any of that. Airbnb should not be putting properties on their site that don't have that. All Airbnbs should meet the commercial standards of the fire brigade, the fire service. And I'm forever meeting landlords that just aren't aware of this. There's so much education to do among landlords. People think of a nice house, I'm just going to put it in Airbnb. If that's a family unit living there, before now you didn't need smoke alarms, but it's an Airbnb, it's a commercial unit and should meet all the fire alarm criteria.
We actually passed a motion in council, I think it was June or July, just around that and around emergency accommodation to make sure that they are all adhering to fire safety.
But yeah, the fire regulations, the Northern Ireland fire regulations, 2010, I think, have always been there, but just no one's aware of them, and it's a very hard job to educate landlords about it because they're not hearing about it.
Thank you, Neil. Neil and Patrick, could I just ask that you turn off your mic,
sorry.
just so
Thank you, Chair. In relation to it, we have no information that the property was previously used as HMO. We have no inspection records to that effect. What Pat then was saying about 15 people coming into it and using it as an Airbnb, that obviously falls outside of the definition of HMO because it has to be a permanent residence. So if a HMO license was put in place, the level of regulation would be there to address some of the issues. Where if it continues on, which sounds like the case, if I don't get a HMO license, we'll continue to monitor to make sure it's not used as HMO. But if it uses Airbnb, you're going to continue having the problems you had of 15. You're going to use an expletive there about being out in the backyard drinking, but that's probably potentially going to happen. The other thing Neil mentioned earlier on as well, that if you contact the office, they have an out-of-hours contact number, which I think is very useful as well. So if there is issues during the middle of the night, the residents have got a source there to go and contact somebody who can go and actually deal with it there and then, as well as necessarily if calling the PSNI if that's required.
Thank you, Kevin. Councillor Duffy.
Yeah, just to confirm that, because I know Neil has given a great spiel, but I just want to confirm from my knowledge, what he's saying is right and accurate, and that's how you operate, because I do know that my aunt regularly contacts you about different issues, and if it's about fire alarms and all the rest of it, and has always been really satisfied with the outcome, because I've had these conversations with her over the last number of months when these issues have been coming up around HMOs in the area, just to see how things were for her. And she has been content in terms of the management company and how it's been operating and has no issues. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Thank you, Neil. So I think what we'll do now is we'll go into confidential. We'll have a quick recess and we'll deliberate a bit and then we'll come back for a decision. All right. So are we okay to go into confidential? All proposer and seconder proposed by Councillor Broad.